First of all, thank you all for joining. For those of you that are early, thank you so much. And for those who just dialed in, you're okay, you're not late, you're on time. So we have quite a few attendees here at the moment. As I was saying just briefly to those that dialed slightly earlier, we have about 40 nations in total that signed up with over 347 registrations for our first webinar in our webinar series. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Alex. I'm part of the facilitation team here at UCC. I'm responsible for looking after our physical events, so the Future Leaders Challenge, and also helping run and organise the webinar series. And with me today, fortunately, is the UCC founder, Stephanie.
Hello and welcome, everyone.
We'll do a proper introduction to Stephanie, but in the interest of time, I'll just run through the typical things of a webinar, just for those that haven't maybe been part of a webinar before, how it will run, and obviously to just explain how we'll interact with you for your questions and answers and that type of thing. Okay, so let's jump straight in and move on to the next slide. What this will cover, so before we start, a couple of things to cover off. And the webinar is obviously part of a webinar series, which I'll talk about shortly. It will last 30 minutes plus 10 minutes for your questions to be answered by us. You're in listen-only mode, I would say active listening. So there's no need to take notes. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. You are on mute. We will record this session, but we will only be recording what you see on screen and our lovely faces. Offer on-demand access later on. So post the webinar, we'll send out a link to you so you can then access this again and then obviously look at the content. So no need to take notes. If you want to, you can, but the webinar will be recorded. We won't see any video yourselves. So for example, if you are, let's say, somewhere in Asia or Australia right now, and we've got a couple of participants that have registered, from there, if you are sat in your pajamas, don't worry, we won't see that and it won't be shared. What I would say is, please ask your questions. Don't be shy. In the bottom of your screens, you'll see a button that says Q&A. That enables you to ask questions throughout the webinar, and we'll actually answer those questions towards the end of the webinar. But please ask those questions as you go through. Please don't be shy. The last thing to note is, really keen to stress this, is the UCC, so myself, Stephanie, and the wider team, or anybody associated with the UCC will never guarantee you to secure your role at the UN. Please be cautious with any other websites, anybody you come across that may claim they can. Okay, so let's just jump into what is the aim of the UCC's webinar series. As you'll see on screen, the webinar series covers lots of things, and today we're going to be talking about UN skills, what skills are required to work in the UN. We will also have a cover letter for UN agency roles, which will be happening shortly in August. We'll come back to talk a bit about that. Making a career change into the UN in August as well. How to network yourself into the UN. The elusive, I know this one really interests you. And it's a common question around how do you network your way into the UN? Is that the only way in? We'll talk about that one later. A personal history form, date to be confirmed on that one, and setting yourself up for a UN competency-based interview. So the aim of the webinar series, the feedback we get is it's often difficult to understand all the steps of the time-consuming UN application process, and they can sometimes go on for months. Our webinars aim to help you understand the various processes by highlighting the common mistakes that our UN insiders may have made themselves in their process of applying, securing an interview, and actually gaining a role. So the registrations are now open to the webinar series. If you head over to unitedcareercoalition.org, what you then need to do is in the top right-hand corner, it says join webinar. If you press that button, that will take you to the registration page, and you can then register for example, the cover letter or maybe all of those webinars and whatever interests you. Okay, so let's briefly cover off the contents. So what are we going to cover today? We're fortunate enough to have our UN Insider today, which is Stephanie, the founder of the UCC. I'll cover off briefly what is the United Career Coalition. So what do we do? What are we all about? And what's the purpose of the UCC? And then to start with, ask a key question, are you the right fit for the UN? Is the UN the right match for you? Which Stephanie will cover off. Insider tips. Every time we do a webinar, we'll give you a view in terms of insider tips. What are your insiders tell us around, in this instance, the skills and competencies you need for a career within the UN. Applying that knowledge, how can you apply that knowledge? We'll cover off that. In the final section, as we said before, the questions you may have, we'll answer as many of those as possible, and then some final tips to take away. Okay, Right, so if we jump into the next page. So what is the United Career Coalition? Probably the best way to describe what the UCC is to explain, I guess, what it was set up for. The UCC was created to allow opportunities to network and connect with UN insiders. And a common challenge, and a lot of feedback we get is around, how do I find out what a role's like at the UN? How do I find out the path someone took to get into the UN? So those individuals will share their advice, having applied, having interviewed, and having secured roles and developed their careers in the UN. The UN insiders are a group of former and current UN system staff. And we call it the UN system because this obviously takes into account the UN and its various agencies. So it won't just cover insiders from the headquarters, it'll actually be from other various agencies. And to give you a bit of a feel for some of those people, we have UN insiders that work in UN agencies such as the IAEA. So for those that don't know, that's the International Atomic Energy Agency. We have people from UNIDO, those that worked previously at the WHO. I think it's a hot topic at the moment, WHO. And obviously those that worked in the headquarters in New York and in Vienna as well. In various sectors across procurement, IT, legal, policy, whatever may interest you in terms of a role. As you said, the UCC is all about enabling opportunities to network and connect with current and former UN staff. And with that lines me up perfectly to introduce you to Stephanie. I'll just give you a bit of a brief introduction for Stephanie. So Stephanie was the founder of UCC, has worked at the United Nations for over a decade, has worked for a specialized UN agency, in the headquarters in Vienna, as well as for the former Director General of the IAEA, who was a Nobel Peace Prize laureate as well. Stephanie's been all around the globe, has met lots of UN officials, and was fortunate enough to meet, we'll have to tell this another time, but Kofi Annan previously, and lots of states and presidents in the past, and government officials from the likes of Latin America, Russia, and I think Africa, if I'm correct. Yeah. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex, for this very kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining today's UN Skills webinar. I'm very excited and happy to have you here on this webinar. So let's not waste too much time and start with the first slide. Are you a right fit for the UN? Is the UN the right match for you? So you may wonder why we included this slide, because naturally I assume that everyone who's on the call today either is interested in a career at the UN or has an interest at least in the work of the UN. So the reason why we included this slide is because me and my UN insiders often get asked, especially by students, what shall I study? You know, what field should I specialize in? And I personally, I always struggle with my reply, and I always reply by sharing my own story and a little bit of my background. So I've studied economics and business law and ended up in one of the most technical UN organizations that are probably out there, working side by side with nuclear scientists. So the point I want to make here, which is really also my very first advice on how to land a job at the UN, is really find something you enjoy. Find something, find a field, find a topic of studies you're passionate about. In general, I would say, if you are naturally good into something, if you find a specialization or a topic that you have a drive for, you automatically have an advantage at the application process and at the interview. There's certainly also, maybe I shared it right at the beginning, there's certainly no golden rule or guarantee that if you study a certain topic or if you go on a field mission, that you actually will land a job at the UN. So there is no guarantee. So you may wonder if the study or the field you specialized in is not so important. What is important for landing a job at the UN? And what we've learned or what we identified is really what's important are skills and competencies. So thank you. On the next slide. So if you probably look at the slide and wonder why we included that. I mean, you probably know what skills are, you know what competencies are. So why did we bring up this slide? Well, while skills and competencies are different, both of them are extremely important to present and demonstrate HR not only what you've acquired through training and experience, but how. So this is why we want to highlight here the importance of UN skills and competencies for the UN.
If I can, Stefan, I think probably what I'll do is I'll try and, I appreciate lots of questions are coming through as we go through. I'll try and ask some questions, sort of typical questions that may come through for you, if that kind of makes it easier and makes it flow faster. Probably the first one of which is talking about, in this instance, the skills that you need. What would be your recommendation for people with their applications in terms of what skill they should use and what they should apply?
Yeah, good question, Alex. So my recommendation would be really to focus on transferable soft skills. I personally always highlight my good time management skills, networking skills, or teamwork skills. Other transferable skills that you can highlight, for example, are your good presentation skills. The good news about transferable skills is that these are portable skills which are relevant across various different fields, various different organizations. And the good news is also that you've acquired those skills already through your university, through school, in your social life. So even if you have no work experience yet, you already have those transferable skills that you can demonstrate. That brings me to the next slide. What type of values, skills, and competencies does the UN actually differentiate? So that's quite important. The UN differentiates between UN organizational core values, UN competencies, and managerial competencies. So why is this so important to know? Well, depending on what job you apply for, you want to highlight the correct UN competencies that are relevant for the job. So let's say you apply for a more senior role, a P4 role, which is a professional P4 role with supervisory skills. You probably want to focus more on the managerial competencies, such as leadership, networking skills. Alex and I, we said this webinar, we will focus on the UN competencies. We have a lot of students on our call today from various universities. We have students from LSE, from Cambridge, from Harvard, from Columbia. So a lot of prestigious universities. So we thought we'd focus on the UN competencies, as these are really competencies and skills that are important for all UN employees. It doesn't matter if you apply for a G post, which is a general post, or a professional post, or whatever post you apply, you really need to focus on those UN relevant competencies.
Okay.
So as I said, here a breakdown. If you look at the column in the middle, we've listed some of those UN competencies. Just for you to know, this list is by far not complete. There are many more UN competencies. What I did is, before the webinar, I consulted with our UN Insiders team, and I've asked all of them which UN competencies they think are most relevant. So this is why we highlighted those 4 ones. So these would be communication skills, teamwork, and planning and organizational skills, and client orientation.
If I can ask, Stephanie, I appreciate that a lot of people may be interested to get some insights here from a UN insider. Specifically, maybe thinking back to your application, what did you use in terms of the competencies? How did you apply them in your application?
Yeah. Well, I've used teamwork skills. I thought the UN is really a big organization. It's like a big family. You work with so many people from around the world. You work with so many different cultures. So and not only that, but you also work with so many different personalities. So I really focused on highlighting multicultural teamworking skills. So we will. What I want to mention here as well is it's sometimes a bit difficult to spot these competencies. So we will, as Alex said already, this webinar today is part of a webinar series. And the next one will be on how to create a cover letter. And in this webinar, we will focus on looking at the job description, how to spot these UN competencies, how to spot the relevant skills, and how to then reflect them in your application documents, and how you tailor your documents towards that job description, really reflecting those UN competencies that are relevant for the specific post. So if you're interested in learning how to do that, sign up for the webinar, for the next webinar, the cover letter. But what I want to share today is really how and where you can demonstrate those skills. So the first, to answer where, this would be application document, you want to highlight those skills, is really the cover letter. The cover letter is part of your personal history form or personal profile. And this is why you want to demonstrate those skills. And the how would you demonstrate such UN competencies or managerial competencies? Well, me and my UN insiders identified that the best way and the most effective way to do so is through using effective skill statements. So thank you for that. So what are effective skill statements? I think this slide really speaks for itself, but what's important here is effective skill statements are basically concise, brief statements that show the value you can bring to an organization or to that specific post. And what's important here are two elements. It's the effective skill statements, that they include both action words and achievements and impacts. The action words are very important, not only to make your application documents ATS friendly, which is application tracking system friendly, but also to highlight to the hiring manager and to HR who will review those documents that you speak the UN language, that you understand what UN action words are used, that they read your documents or they read your application document and see you're familiar with the language, you're familiar with the words that are used in the UN family, so to say.
Just on that, Stephanie, you've got, I guess, a lot of experience with UN language, and trying to touch you on that. What would be a very good example for people to use as a skills statement in their applications, in their personal history?
Sure. Yeah. So one good example would be, for example, delivered a training on sustainable development goals to over 100 managers in order to ensure X, Y, and Z, or developed a training plan in order to increase customer satisfaction by 15%. So the delivered or the developed would be the UN action word. And then achievement and impact would be by showcasing, in this case, with quantitative data, showcasing the impact you had.
Okay.
So yeah, we included this slide here because it's also important not only to use these UN action keywords, but also to be creative. Again, this list is by far not complete. We try to highlight those that are most relevant and that are most common. So you see on the left side, we grouped here some action words by UN skills. So if you look at communication and writing skills, you could use, for example, drafted, recommended, communicated. Interpersonal skills are also quite important here. And if you look on the right side under achievements and impact, you will see again 4 categories that we give you here as a guideline. Again, the list is not complete. We will hopefully also in the next webinars cover more of those achievement and impacts and action verbs, but it really always depends on the job description and the job you apply for.
Yeah. I appreciate a lot of people raising their hands and lots of questions coming in. Please keep the questions coming in, but we have to wait until the end, I'm afraid. I will try and answer one of your questions live now. I appreciate that the list is getting quite long. So this one's good for you, Stephanie, in the context of what we're talking about here. The example is obviously saying, you mentioned 3 million. What happens if I don't have the experience of working on it? For example, I don't know when I worked on a project with 3 million. But if you don't have like a huge, extensive, I guess the question is, if you don't have that huge, extensive experience of implementing things at that level, or percentage reductions or large projects, what can you do? What can you put in your application?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So to be honest, the first time someone shared with me those categories, I was quite intimidated myself because I also never had an experience where I could say I reduced expenses by such a huge amount of money. So what's important here to understand it. It's not about how high the number is or high the percentage is. It's about showcasing to HR and to the hiring manager in your application documents that by applying your skills and by showcasing your skills, that you actually achieve something and have a positive impact. And this can be anything. This can be what you're basically, if you had a summer, if you worked in a charity organization during the summer holidays, or if you helped out in your local community, whatever you did where you used your skills in order to leave an impact, a positive impact, is something which I would highly recommend to showcase in those documents.
Okay, let's go on to the next slide.
Yeah, that already brings us to the last slide on how to prepare an effective skill statement using UN action keywords. And I want to share a couple of, me and my UN insiders created these 5 steps, which should basically give you a little bit of a help or support in structuring and preparing your application documents in a more structured way. So some tips here to take away is really to take your time. Allow yourself time when you create and review your UN application documents. Review the open position. Pay particular attention to the parts on responsibilities and competencies. And the best way to bring across here some of the examples and some of the lessons learned that we've identified is through sharing my story. So when I worked for the UN, after a couple of years, I thought, it would be interesting to look out for other roles and apply for other UN organizations and just see what's out there. So I started applying for various UN roles, and some of them on the same level, same grade, some of them higher grade. Long story short, I didn't really get any positive feedback or reply. I didn't even get invited to an interview. And I thought, how is that possible? I already work for the UN, I'm experienced, I have some good examples to share of my previous work at the UN, but nothing came back. And what I didn't consider here, and this is something I really want to highlight, is that the UN receives up to 800 applications per post. So you really want to make sure that when you draft your application documents, there is no standard guide or no standard application documents. You want to make sure that each application and each cover letter is tailored to the open position. So my advice here is really try to create application documents that stand out by A, reviewing the open position, B, using those effective skill statements to showcase your achievements and the impacts you had, by using action verbs, and also by reviewing and proofreading, showcasing your writing skills. Because this is a way you can, with a good CV, with a good cover letter, without any spelling or grammar mistakes, is a great way to showcase your writing skills as well.
Okay. On to the final tips to take away.
Thank you very much. So this brings us to the final tips to take away for best chances to success. So I think the first tip, tailor each application, I just covered in enough detail, as well as the tip on follow a structure. We really hope this 5-step process will help you. I always prefer to have some kind of guidance that I can use to structure my applications. So I hope this is useful for you. And as I said, review and proofreading is also extremely important. I usually ask a friend or a colleague of mine or someone from my family if they can have a look at the document and just look at it with a fresh eye and help me spot mistakes that I probably won't even see anymore because I read the document so many times. But the final tip really I want to focus on here on this slide is use a clear writing style, which goes hand in hand with understanding the organization. So why is that so important? You probably look at this and understand the organization. You probably think, well, naturally, I will do my homework when applying for a UN role. But not only me and my UN insiders, together with HR, really realized and identified a common mistake that when people submit their application documents. And that common mistake is that they would use way too much emotional language. I often receive cover letters for review, which entail really emotional or heartbreaking stories. While it's correct, of course, that the purpose of the UN, stated in the UN Charter, is to solve international problems of humanitarian character. It is still an application document that you should tailor to the relevant post. This should not be an essay about how to save the world. And this is something which I always try to make my people who reach out and who want to learn how to write a cover letter, really try to make them understand. It's about the role you apply for. Understand what is required for the role. It's not so much about your story and how you see the world, or what you think could be done better. My advice here is keep those stories for the interview, and at the application document, when you write your application documents, really focus on what is required for the job. So in short, the advice is here: less emotions and more professionalism.
Really good tips.
Yeah,
really good tips.
I really hope this is useful, and I really hope it helps you. It saves you a lot of time and disappointment, and it really helps you to understand what is important, and as I said, how to highlight those relevant skills and competencies. And I think this is our final tip slide before I hand over to Alex to go through one more slide, and then we will answer your questions. Maybe before we go to the next slide, also, if you want to, I recently had an interview with Stephanie Filion, a really good journalist writing for Past Blue, and there's a podcast available now on the Past Blue website. It's for free. Just tune in. It's full of some UN insider tips. She interviewed me and some other UN insider colleagues. So we thought maybe that would be something you're interested in.
And that's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and since you find it under unscripted. I think so. Okay, great. I look forward to your questions, and I'll now hand over to Alex.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to run through just a brief overview in terms of what UCC does in terms of our services. I appreciate we're going to have people on the webinar today that maybe have applied for example, some of the upcoming webinars on the cover letter. Maybe have even applied for the Future Leaders Challenge. So let me just run through those briefly. The first service is our application guides. So we currently do have cover letter guide, which you can download yourself and read yourself and peruse at your leisure. Obviously, alternatively, you can join us for the webinar and receive obviously similar materials and get the opportunity to answer your questions. But the application guides we're going to start to build over time with UN Insight, obviously thoughts and tips. Advice via video, so we offer one-to-one coaching. So, for example, if you wanted a one-to-one video with Stephanie to get a bit of a background in terms of her career and how she sort of managed to navigate the way into the IAEA and beyond for her career, or somewhere else, another organisation, we can provide that. If you have an upcoming interview, so we have some positive news recently around an interview for somebody in New York. Have I jumped the gun? Or?
No, that's fine. Yeah, like we're always very happy and proud if we can, of course, support and help our clients. So, this is something which I wanted to cover as well. Sharing this advice that if you apply for a role, my advice would be apply for as many roles as possible where you think that they match your profile. And you never know, especially now during these challenging times. So as Alex just said, we are very proud that we could help someone secure a role in New York. And but the candidate is currently based in Asia with their families. So it's great news because starting a new role for a job in New York, but being able to stay with your family is something really nice. So
the UN had changed, I guess, with obviously remote onboarding.
Correct,
roles, which is a great sign. So the networking event, as I said, some people may have already applied. The application end date for this is the end of this month, end of July. And obviously, we are aware that there are some challenges at the moment with travel, especially if you're based in the UK. Traveling from the UK, for example, to Vienna, which is where the event is planned to be. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll make a decision in terms of candidates to go forward for the event, based on the applications we have, and obviously the ones that are still yet to come over the next couple of days. Then we'll make a decision, and then we'll be in touch with the candidates in more detail, just to make everyone aware around what we're going to do and what the plan is for the event. Either be it run it in some remote capacity for those who can't attend, or maybe some other options, but all to be discussed. And then the last thing then is learning via webinars. A relatively new piece of work we're doing, but we're looking at obviously trying to learn as we go. And the next webinar, as you said, is the cover letter. Obviously, vitally important, as Stephanie said, for your personal history form. Career change. So for those of you maybe that have already started a career, maybe you're in finance, or maybe you're in a law profession, you're in IT, and you think, well, how do I make that leap into the UN and do something different? That's for those people that are looking for that career change. And the last one, this is one I referenced earlier on, your favourite, networking your way in. And a common question, I'm sure, I can guarantee someone's going to ask a question. Is it that you only need somebody at the UN to get you a job? I know that's a common question and maybe a misconception, but we'll come to that question. But ultimately, this webinar here will be networking your way in.
Now, if you want to learn more about the webinar series, please head to our website, unitedcareercoalition.org.
Also, don't forget our Q&A video, where we answer more UN-related questions, or head over to our free blog.
Thanks for watching.